I would focus on what we're going to talk about today, which is not just the bureaucracy as it is today, but how it used to be. So you got to know what Max Weber's piece is about the professionalized bureaucracy. You got to know about the meritocracy, the merit principle, treating everybody the same. All that is very, very important. But that's not how it used to be in this country. Well, it's how we started out. Like maybe under Washington's time, because if you look at Washington's appointments, it's kind of a who's who list of people, all very well qualified individuals, top level cabinet people. Not always people who agreed with Washington. Washington himself was more of a federalist. I know it says he didn't join an official political party, but he had federalists and he had Democrat Republicans in his first cabinet, because the goal of this was to have the best people possible. But we kind of moved away from this during Jackson's time. So during the Founding Fathers' time, we had the meritocracy, some word you're going to have to know. Remember what I said about meritocracy? What's a meritocracy? That's what we covered on Friday. Come on, folks. What's a meritocracy? What is anyocracy? What is democracy? No sidelines here. Seriously, what is democracy? I can't believe I'm asking this. Ruled by the people. So what is meritocracy? If demos is people and democracy is ruled by the people, what is meritocracy? I'm sorry? Government.
Government has the power?
No. Democracy is ruled by the people. So what is meritocracy?
Ruled by merit?
Yeah, ruled by the people who have the most merit. What is merit? Yeah, achievement. You've done something. You've earned something. When I was in Scouts, they had these things called like merit badges. You had to prove that you were proficient in something in order to get that badge and move on to the next class. Does that make sense to y'all? So meritocracy means, let's say in sports, a meritocracy is it's settled on the field. The two groups will play each other. The best team wins, right? Everything except for the Seattle-Atlanta game, where there was obviously pass interference toward the end. That was settled by refs. The other games were settled on the field, right? I mean, just the better team wins. Well, who is the better team? People can, you have these sports writers who can vote for something, or people plug variables into a computer, but in the end, it's settled on the field. Nowadays, that's how things are done. But remember I told y'all last week that national championships until I was in graduate school by the time they were actually settled on the field. They were always voted for after the bowl games. And when I was a kid, like 1970 when I was born, they didn't even play each other for a national championship. Bowl games were exhibitions. They awarded the national championship before the end of the season. The bowl games are like the Shrine Bowl. You ever watch the Shrine Bowl? The North versus South in Mobile. You ever see these bowls? No, nobody watches those except for scouts. Those are exhibitions, right? That's how bowls work. Orange Bowl, Rose Bowl, those are exhibitions. Several of them created during the Great Depression to get people to spend money and travel cross country to these, new places like California or poorer southern states. Peach Bowl, all that. Look when these things were created. They were exhibitions. They were designed to get people to get out of their comfort zone. Cotton Bowl. Go down and have one extra game outside your conference. That's what bowls used to be. But now it's meritocracy. So you actually have to win your national championship. It's not decided by sports writers so much less so. That's what a meritocracy was. Jacksonian democracy was very different. They have something called the spoils system. Who here has ever heard that term before, the spoils system? Go ahead, how is it used?
You kind of get all your friends to, you elect your friends to work with you?
Yeah, you bring in people who know. It's not what you know, it's who you know. It's the connections, the buddy system.
They're not qualified for the job, really, right?
Yeah, regardless whether they're qualified for the job. How many, Does anybody know where the term spoils system comes from, or what are spoils in the first place? I mean, you're like, oh, spoiled food, gotta throw it out. No, different kind of spoils. Yeah, what was that from the wars? What are spoils? Whenever you looted a town, it's whatever you could carry away. Those are what the spoils are. And they would always say the phrase, to the victor the spoils. Oftentimes, let's say like when Sir Henry Morgan, actually dated a descendant of his, he was an English pirate. He got a lot of other English folks and a lot of other pirates to go along with him, because when they attacked Panama, they pretty much said, you know, once we sack Panama, conquer Panama, you can get what you want. Like, the city is yours. And so whatever you can take away was yours for capturing. That's what spoil systems were. So in other words, the idea was in an election, when you won the election, you got your friends' appointments. And that was seen as a good thing. In fact, people will defend the spoil system, saying, well, this brings new talent, new blood into the system. New people will get accepted in. And thus you see Andrew Jackson says, to the victors, the spoils. Because when they won the battle, you get all the stuff afterwards. Elections were seen as battles. And they thought this will be kind of a good thing. New people coming on in, new ideas. Make sense? And oftentimes, who your friends were, well, the color of green would show up. Not red state or blue state, but yeah, you might donate a lot of money. And then you, of course, when you donate a lot of money, you expect something in return for it, right? Yeah, one guy donated to a campaign $1.25 million. And he is on record as saying he has been promised a Supreme Court appointment. This person's a millionaire, so they has several million. I guess this person wants to be on the Supreme Court and has donated $1.25 million. This is what happens sometimes. Remember, two stories, the story of elitism and the story of pluralism. This very much fits with which of the theories and why. The spoil system. What do you think it is? Elitism or pluralism? And no, I'm not going to yell at you like meritocracy and figuring it out, or what democracy is. It is a tough question. What is it? Pluralism or elitism? Why pluralism? Go ahead. No, you make a strong case for both. You'll notice I didn't say pluralism over it, did I? Go ahead, Tyree. Give me a shot. Well, what is pluralism?
Like pluralist views?
Yeah, what are pluralism? What's pluralism? More than one, good.
Like
So what kind of theory would it be?
It's like checks and balances, it's kind of like multiple groups.
Yeah, multiple groups. So if you think about it, multiple groups could take over, right? Multiple groups can get into politics. Now, Quentin, how is this elitism? Go ahead. Yeah. I mean, this guy's basically buying himself a Supreme Court position, having lots of money. Bless you. Having lots of money buying you access sounds like elitism, right? Not all of us have $125 million.
Did you talk to him about that fine?
The what?
That fine today?
No, not yet.
On
No, come on. I told everybody, stop me 5 minutes afterwards. I'll go get talk to you. No, I went by, but they only had student work after class. Waiting until they talk to some people. But yeah, that's what the spoil system is. Some would say it's pluralism because new people, multiple different groups could get in based on if you won the election. Here's another phrase people use. Elections have consequences. So instead of having the same old groups there, new types of people would come in. But then again, your qualifications are not as strong. I'm not here to tell you one type of system is better than the other. How many of y'all saw a movie called Gangs of New York? Oh no, it's starting to fade. I used to have everybody who was a political science major used to watch that. It's a good movie to see if you want to see a good political science film. Gangs of New York. Leonardo DiCaprio, Daniel Day-Lewis, Cameron
When did it come
Diaz.
out?
It's set in New York in the mid-1800s.
Oh.
And it starts with, it's basically Native Americans. And no, not Native Americans like Indians. They used to call them that. Native Americans are a rather new term. The people who were natives were people who had been in America, like they could trace their ancestry before the waves of immigrants from Europe came. So in other words, I mean, they may have been from Europe, but they were in this country from like Jamestown era to the late 1700s. Those were what were called the natives, or Native Americans, even if they immigrated here. The new immigrants coming in, like from Ireland, Italy, Germany, those folks found themselves fighting. That's what the gangs in New York were. They were often immigrants versus natives, or those who lived longer there. And it's gang war. It really is. There's a great scene in the, I don't know if y'all have seen it. I should look for the YouTube clip and post it for you. But they have like, I guess it's like an apartment complex or like a place where people are living. It catches fire. The firefighters show up, but they don't fight the fire. They're waiting to be paid to fight the fire. So the people who've gotten out with all their valuables are trying to pay them to put out the fire. And they won't start putting out the fire until they get paid. And then a rival fire group shows up, and they want, of course, the money to put out the fire. So the two groups of firefighters are beating each other up. They're fighting over who gets to put out the fire while the fire is burning the whole building down. This is, by the way, this comes closer to 1863. It actually ends right around 1863. Worst ever race riots in this country. You ought to take a look how many people died because the U.S. government, to fight the Civil War, instituted a draft. And New York City was Democrat territory, not pro-Lincoln. And they were not enamored with free blacks heading around New York. So hundreds were killed. I mean, they would torch orphanages full of black kids. This is a true story, 1863. Anyone who was a Republican, wealthy or poor, worked for a wealthy Republican paper like the New York Tribune. They attacked the draft wheel, burned all the draft notices, and then just went off to the African-American neighborhood to set that on fire. You got to take a look at it. New York City riots. Look at the body count compared to the LA riots when I was an undergraduate in 1992. Yeah, that's how the movie Gangs of New York ends. But one of the characters in it is, if you see the character with the beard and then he's got the money bag for his head, is Boss Tweed. And he was a spoil system person. I mean, he controlled New York. He was the boss because he had the political power. He would be like the mayor, and then he would hand out jobs as political favors to people. He'd hire you because you would go work for him. He was his own government, if you think about it. Yeah, they would show elections, like somebody's running for sheriff, or like one candidate killed another candidate, like in broad daylight. Everybody keeps talking about the good old days in politics. I keep thinking, are you sure? Are you sure those are good old days? Maybe we just haven't covered enough history. Yeah, it's a great book. If you ever want to read it, check it out over break. It's called The Good Old Days. They were terrible. You ought to look at your food, sanitation, everyday things. There's a lot of stuff we take for granted that we have today. And yes, political appointments were doled out for campaign cash or loyalty, and oftentimes that could mean which person of the opposite party are you going to kill. And it's not just a New York thing. I went to a museum in New Mexico where they had a, it was like a trombone with a bullet hole in it. And what it was is the Democrats were marching around the state court, or they were marching around the courtyard in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Somebody took a shot at the band. And so the bullet lodged in the trombone. Didn't a Republican office get firebombed yesterday evening? Arizona paper, the Arizona Republic. You know, they've received all kinds of death threats, and they have to have bodyguards out to protect the paper. Remember I promised you an assassination story? This is how the second president to be assassinated was killed. He was a Union general. He was the Speaker of the House. I think he ran for Senate at the same time. He's the only guy who's ever held like 3 jobs at once. He was President, Speaker of the House, and Senate. Well, he got, in 1880, he won all 3 offices. Obviously, he'd have to choose one or the other according to the rules. Pretty well connected, pretty powerful. But and in fact, he was just like a lot of other politicians of his era, doled out favors. You know, he'd take people's cash and then get them appointments. Everybody did it. This is, how many of y'all taken humanities? 1 or 2? You ever cover Roman Empire? These are both, this is James Blaine and John Sherman, who ran against each other for the Republican nomination. Now, you ever heard the story about Julius Caesar? He actually had a fight with one of his fellow generals, whose name was Pompey. And Pompey and Caesar, basically Rome fell into a civil war between these 2 generals. It wasn't supposed to be this way. They were both, Rome was a republic, but this is when Rome becomes an empire. This is when they get rid of representative government. You had 2 powerful generals battled each other. And what they would do is they would promise favors to other generals or other senators or other people to get them on their side. So they attempted to use bribery to both sides to, promising what political position you'll be. So the same person get multiple offers. And so they're showing these 2 Americans, just like these Romans of old, bribing people to get them on their side. Because that's what happened. This is just an everyday cartoon. It's from the 1876 election. Now, James Garfield, shortly after he became president, only a couple months after he became president, see what happened is he took lots of campaign cash from people. And there was a guy who was a guy who wanted to be a U.S. ambassador. He came from a wealthy family. And so because he was from a wealthy family, he donated lots of money to the Garfield campaign. And he wanted to be appointed ambassador someplace. This is how you being ambassador, you develop political connections. This is what he wanted to do. Well, how many of y'all play musical chairs? You ever do that where they go around? Now, how's the game musical chairs work? There's not enough chairs for everybody. Yeah, they like play some music and you're all walking around, but there's always one more person than there are chairs. Where I went to college, we used to talk about how you bought a hunting license, you didn't buy a parking permit. Because the rumor was that they sold more parking permits than there were parking spaces. See, that's why we call them a hunting license. It was at a big state school. So you have to drive around. I've always found a spot here. But that hadn't happened. But if you think about it, they took more money in than they had positions to give people. So when the music stopped, like musical chairs, this guy, Charles Guiteau, there wasn't a job for him. And he got kind of mad, right? He'd given money, he expected to get some powerful political position. He didn't get it. So he saw President Garfield waiting to get on a train with all his entourage in Union Station, walked up behind him and shot him in the back. And that killed Garfield, right? Not quite. Anybody know what happened? I mean, it's bad to get shot in the back. I mean, he was like laid out. But see, the thing was, a president getting shot was pretty interesting. I mean, Lincoln died he got shot in the evening, he died the next day. Garfield was lying around, he wasn't dead yet. Like lying out on a slab, and so a lot of people got really interested, and they were like, they'd go by and they're like, oh look, and they were like poking at the bullet, trying to see what was going on. Bad medical equipment of that time, Nobody's washing their hands. Alexander Graham Bell tried to invent something that was going to pull the bullet out. Everybody just playing around, poking at the bullet, get to see, hey, you get to walk by, you know, and he's just lying there in agony. So he died after a couple of months. So he got shot like sometime over the summer, and he died like sometime in September. So he probably would have lived, except folks just weren't so careful about washing their hands and poking at the bullet and trying to get it out and not sanitizing things. So he eventually died. And Charles Guiteau was hung for killing the president.
Oh, he was hung?
Yeah,
I
hung.
didn't guess so.
Yeah, put a noose. Hung him, killed him, executed him for killing the president. But then things changed, because right after that, see, this was in the 1880 election, so he was killed in 1881. By then you have the Pendleton Act is passed in 1883, which is designed to clean up the system. And so this cartoon shows that these are all the people with like campaign cash and money and favors, and they're being denied patronage jobs. They're being stopped. And this is actually President Grover Cleveland, who got elected in 1884. He's dealing with a mound of people who are all trying to get money off the government by getting a job. So that's kind of when it stopped. So from 1883 to 1978, we've had something which has tried to limit the spoils system. And in 1978, they kind of professionalized things. This is a good site to know. It's called the Office of Personnel Management. And yes, I put on their logo, jobs at OPM, where you can go to opm.gov. Office of Personnel Management. That's where all the U.S. government jobs are. So if you want to look up what there's a job in, I mean, that's like a giant job board for political science majors. So even if you're a first-year student, even if you're a sophomore, junior, even if you're a senior and you're not going to graduate till May, you ought to look up what they've got and figure out what they're looking for. See, unlike the old days where they were just like, if you had money, you got a job. Here they actually, you have to have standards, like you have to show some levels of experience. You have to be able to produce things like a writing sample, right? Gotta, you know, most of them require a college degree. So in other words, back to meritocracy. This is how most civil servants are hired. The CIA exam is really huge, really long. If you want to get in the CIA by May, I would start like right now working on it, because it's about a 30, 40 page application. A lot of it's gotta post people who know you. So in some ways it is who you know, not so much who you know, but who knows you. People who can vouch for you as trustworthy. Yeah, the U.S. government is the largest employer in the United States, more than Walmart. That doesn't even count the 10 million state and local government appointed for the people hired. So when you add up all the governments, not only that, not that many people go into political science, so yeah, you've got an inside track. Now, you can see a very small number of actual government jobs are political appointees. We still have some. Cabinet positions, heads of specialized agencies, deputy secretaries, undersecretaries. There was a story during Vietnam where, in order, you know, because you always had in Vietnam, some folks were like infiltrators. They learned a little bit of English. They tried to sneak on U.S. bases to do terrorism acts. And so they would have people call out, like, you know, you have to, you know, the sentries would challenge you, you'd have to say, all right, who's the president of the United States? And of course, some people learned to change their accent some, and they learned like a few government positions to beat these sentries. And so a friend of mine told me a story about how he was trying to get back on. See, he was from the Philippines. He was part of the special infiltrator group where they went out to call in airstrikes on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Because they realized they couldn't destroy the trail. I mean, drop a ton of bombs, but it's not like a giant highway or something. So what they had to do is they had to take out armed convoys. So you'd have to know when the convoy was going through. So they basically, I know if you're Filipino, you don't look like you're from Vietnam, but hey, oh, you're from Asia, so you're in. So that's what he did during the Vietnam War. And he talked about trying to get back, because of course they have to get back on base. And he gets challenged by a person who goes, "Who's the President of the United States?" He goes, "Lyndon B. Johnson." "Who's the Secretary of Defense?" "Robert McNamara." "Who's the Undersecretary?" "I don't know who the... Oh, yeah, you're right." They probably would have shot him if he knew. But yeah, the joke was that they have like a big, long bureaucratic list that they were trying to make sure he was the authentic person. Now, some of the new trends that we keep around government agencies, and the number of employees in the U.S. government has stayed relatively similar. How many times have you heard stories? "Oh, government's growing. The bureaucracy is growing. It's out of control. Government's getting larger and larger. Government spending may be up. But are the number of government employees going up?" You'll test this in just a few minutes to see for yourself what it is. But yeah, one argument is that we haven't created those agencies. We may create agencies, but not people. Because of this, we're outsourcing the bureaucracy. You'll notice we don't have a lot of government employees, but we still have lots of government tasks to perform. So the trend is to outsource these to the private sector. And so what they'll do is they'll have basically a bidding process goes on. This is what I used to do before I came here about it. So government will put out like the tasks that they normally perform, they'll put them out as bids. And the contractor with the best bids gets the job. So you're performing government tasks, but you're still a private sector crew. Now why would you do this? What's the advantage of that? Why would you want to outsource some of this to the private sector? What are the pros and cons of it? I'm not here to tell you one's right or wrong.
So the pros and cons of what?
What's the pros and cons of outsourcing jobs to the private sector?
You want opportunity.
Okay, yeah. I mean, you know, the government employee is going to be doing the same function over and over again, whereas you could bring in some outside groups. Go ahead, John. Well, the agencies haven't changed, so they still have the same mandate. It's just different people are going to perform. Who knows? Maybe what you're thinking is if there's more private sector, then more private sector ideas might get in. Okay, I can think that. What else? Why else would you outsource bureaucracy? Well, think about this. If there's a contract, which contractor wins it? Sometimes it's the lowest bidder. So, in theory, how could this be an advantage? Yeah, so in other words, if you think about it, a government employee, you've got to cover their health care, you've got to cover pension programs, a lot of other things. If you outsource it, then the company that person worked for has to cover things. So it's designed to save the government a lot of money. They started doing this in the 1990s. Well, I mean, they've been doing it a long time, but it really started taking off in the 1990s. Have you heard the phrase Beltway bandits? Have you ever heard that? That's what they are. Beltway bandits are these kinds of groups. So, Rand Corporation is one of them. If you ever want to do this kind of stuff, I mean, it's a big industry. SAIC, which is Scientific Applications International Corporation, that's another contractor. CACI, there's a whole bunch of them. Urban Institute. And a lot of MSI was another competitor of ours, Management Systems International. During the Iraq War, they started making front page news. See, not a lot of people knew what I was doing. But during the Iraq War, you had a lot of government contractors. Have you heard about these? Involved in Iraq and Afghanistan, they would provide a lot of services. Well, if I said Halliburton, would you know what I was talking about? What was Halliburton? Actually, it's an oil company, believe it or not. But their CEO was Dick Cheney, and so they started doing lots of other things because he was pretty well connected. Now, he wasn't CEO of Halliburton when he became vice president, but Halliburton won a lot of no-bid contracts. So they provided a lot of the services to the U.S. soldiers in Iraq, some of them well done, some of them not. But the political connections were there because of who's the CEO. A lot of times people would they would work for a government agency for a while, then they would leave the government agency, and you go into business for yourself because then there's the real money, right? Instead of earning a government salary, you would run a corporation, and a lot of times because you knew people in the government agency, they would go to you for the process. There's actually points that are awarded in the bidding process. I don't know if you know this. If you're a minority-owned business, a woman-owned business, if you're a veteran of wars, these would give you points in the process. So if you were a small business, you got certain points and advantages in it. So it's not just the cheapest. Sometimes it is the cheapest, but a lot of times there's a point system that's created. So our corporation was a husband and wife team, and he had served in the Vietnam War. She was a professor at National Defense University. So, and we never had a single employee over 50, so we could qualify for small business. So we could win a fair number of bids just on those based on the point system. Yeah, we wouldn't hire a new person until somebody left. So we could always stay at just a shade under 50 to qualify for small business benefits. Kind of an interesting situation. That's the company I work for, by the way. But yeah, they're kind of controversial. Because those are relatively new training. Now, in terms of elitism versus pluralism, here's another phrase to know: technocrat. It's not just used in America, it's used in a lot of others. Like technocrat, I know it sounds like technology, but it's not always. It's basically another way of saying like the experts, those who really know what's going on, those who know how the system works. They're like long-time, powerful bureaucrats. Remember I told you about principal-agent problems last week? And about the agent for a sports player? You know, these are like the super agents, the technocrats. They really know how the system works. I mean, with members of Congress coming in, Congress doesn't always know how these things work. The technocrats know a lot more. They know the system. A lot of them are lifers. They've been around like their entire career. And so, in many cases, the bureaucracy knows a lot more than those who regulate it, the members of Congress. You're getting elected, you're getting stuck on a committee, you may not know what's going on, the bureaucrats know what's really happening. And so a lot of times, bureaucrats get a wide range of power to interpret the law the way they see fit. That's why I call it a principal agent problem. Because the agent knows more than the principal. The sports agent knows more than the player about the contracts. They can probably award themselves a pretty good deal. That's what happens. Not only that, as you can see, bureaucracies can get kind of messy. They can get to be a pretty big web. We had a student named Janice Jo Marquis. Did anybody get to know her? I think Sydney met her, John, and so on. Yeah, she was trying to apply to be a U.S. citizen, and it was like following rabbit holes all over the place, trying to figure out which agency had her application. Somebody messed up somewhere along the line. Everybody points fingers at everybody. It's really hard to get through stuff. Which is why it really helped to have a member of Congress. I keep waiting to see her in the Johnny Isaacson ad, because that's who we went through. I told her, I said, she goes, which politician should I go through to cut through all this? I said, well, Johnny Isaacson. I said, why? I said, he's running for re-election next year. It's kind of like when you play well in sports, that's like your contract year. You want to do your best. So you get a new good contract. Now the way that we keep bureaucracy from being too powerful. Remember pluralism, many different groups, but it's also about keeping one group from getting too powerful. Bureaucrats can get super powerful if we didn't have a couple things to hold them there. Confirmation hearings, like when they get into office, you can start grilling them, ask them a lot of questions about what they would do. So you come back to hold them to it after they get in. These oversight committees can, there's a group that's supposed to watch over you. Like, let's say, agriculture committee is supposed to watch over the Secretary of Agriculture, so they're not getting away with whatever they want to do. Say a debate about whether certain pesticides should be used. This exposes whether pesticide corporations are watering down the laws, or whether interest groups regulating pesticides are having too much power. It can go either way. Sometimes you can have congressional hearings. In 2005, how old were y'all anyway? 10 years old? 15? 2? 2005? How old were y'all? 9? Okay. Y'all know, obviously, like what, 2,000 people or so drowned in Hurricane Katrina? I don't know what the official death toll is. All I know is I stayed not too far from that area at a Days Inn for where most of the flooding took place. And when I went back, I took some students on back. We couldn't find the Days Inn. The Days Inn was done under. There were a fair number of homeless people in the neighborhood, so the death toll might be a lot higher. We don't really know. But here's the problem, folks. We have this group called FEMA. You ever heard of FEMA? Anybody know what it stands for? Out of curiosity. Federal Emergency. It's the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So FEMA is supposed to step in when there's a disaster. Now here's what happened. The U.S. president at the time, the first FEMA director was a college buddy of his. So he served as FEMA director for 4 years. Then he jumped out into the private sector. The new person who got in was a college friend of that FEMA director. He had been a lawyer for FEMA for a year, like the chief counsel. Before that, he was the lawyer for the Arabian Horses Association. You know, Arabian horses, fancy horses. People put, they're like show horses. So that was his big qualification. And then he lied. He said that he was the city manager for Enid, Oklahoma. Turned out he was just an intern. He wasn't even city manager of Enid, Oklahoma. How big is Enid, Oklahoma? Very small. I mean, so the guy was like about as inexperienced as anybody could be. So when levees are breaking all over the place and they're flooding from Hurricane Katrina, and folks are like trying to jump into boats, you know, save other people, and hospitals are going underwater, and nursing homes are going underwater. I mean, I won't fault the guy. He was like running all around trying to do stuff, but he didn't know how to be FEMA director. And when Congress was voting on stuff, they were voting on stuff. Most of the money went to other states. It didn't even go to Louisiana or Mississippi. So you had to have a series. We found out all of these because of congressional hearings afterwards. Now, it would have been nice if we had these hearings before, not after. But afterwards, people started, Congress started investigating, other people started investigating. We found out that Hurricane Katrina money was going to other states. We found out this guy was like super unqualified to be a FEMA director. He only got it through connections, people he knew. The guy who left FEMA went out and formed his own company so he could win FEMA contracts to provide stuff, because that's where the real money is.
Is it what company?
The guy's name was Joseph Alibi. I forget which company, but he used to be FEMA director. He left FEMA so that he could bid on FEMA contracts.
Oh.
So I forget what his company was, but that's how you really make money in Washington. You form your own company. Hey, most of the people I worked with in DC before I came down here, I worked with generals, I worked with admirals. I worked with a guy who was the commander of the aircraft carrier, the John F. Kennedy. You ever heard of that? It's like huge. Most of them had retired, and once they got out of government and retired, they formed a company so they could bid on contracts, make some money. Those are my coworkers. I always felt like that Sesame Street, like, you know, one of these things is not like the other. There were a couple of geeky people like me. Now, the argument is whether or not government employment has grown dramatically in years. So I want to show you what it looks like, and then I'm going to have you do some testing. Maybe if I turn it down so it's hey, that worked. I need to remember to do that next time. Set up. So take a look at what we got. The number of people who were government employees. When did we reach 500,000 in U.S. history? Can you all see? Around when? Right around World War I. Because we drafted a whole bunch of people, or got a lot of volunteers. A lot of people joined the military. The military is part of government. So that's when we went over 1 million people. And let's see, when did we make our first million in employment by government? Can y'all see?
Is it hard to see the years?
Oh, okay. It's basically just before, right around, here's where we are going into World War I. So for about 500,000 to 1 million was during the New Deal. And it built up over time. Like FDR was in office for like 12 years before World War I. So over that time, this is where we put a lot of people to work for the U.S. government, doing things like, building bridges, clearing away brush, building campsites down by Franklin D. Roosevelt State Park. Okay, look what we did in World War II. We went from like 1 million to 4 million, didn't we? Dropped down. This is Korea War, by the way. But what do you notice now? It's still gone back up. The current trends, however, were to decline somewhat. This is your privatization of bureaucracy. So there's usually an increase, and then in the 1970s we started cutting back, spend a fair amount on defense in the early 80s, still a small growth level, and then slowly dropped off. How many do we have working for the U.S. government now? How many employees in the U.S. government? Go ahead and look it up.
$2.79 million?
2.7.
No.
2.79 million. So a little less than when I last did these slides at 2.8 million. So it's slowly going down. Some of that is due to sequestration. When they had the budget freeze or something. Do we have a representative bureaucracy? I know what you're thinking right now. What's a representative democracy? A representative bureaucracy. You know what a representative democracy is. What would be a representative bureaucracy? Well, think about it. What is the bureaucracy anyway? Remind me. Anybody know? What is the bureaucracy? That's what we've been covering for the last 2 days. Remember, we got an exam next week. Gotta be ready for that.
You want what you wrote down?
No, just what is the bureaucracy? Hey, you want to go ahead and take it? Good. What's the bureaucracy? I just want to make sure you all know, like you all can explain what it
This
is.
is when the decisions are made by state officials.
Yeah, state officials in charge of making decisions. Which branch? Executive branch. Okay. Primarily, they make up the overwhelming amount. Even the post office makes up more than the other two branches combined, by a long shot. But do we have a representative bureaucracy? Now, what would a representative bureaucracy be? I don't mean like elected representatives. What's another way to describe a representative group? Is this survey representative of the whole population? What do we mean by that? Go ahead, take a shot. I'm not going to take off 5 points today. What does it mean to have a representative?
A small part represents a whole.
Well, think about this. If we had a representative bureaucracy, it would be a bureaucracy that is representative of the population. It looks like the population. Does that make sense? You could look at it many different ways, right? What would a representative bureaucracy be in terms of gender? What would half of government employees be? Yeah, and half would be men, right? That would be a representative bureaucracy. Do we have that? Are you sure? All right, let's take a look for somebody. Let's do this together. Let's take a look at statistics.
James, you got 5 minutes.
I do. We can take a look to see. Now this is accurate by the OPM.gov. Okay, here we go. Male versus female. There you are. Now, believe it or not, it's actually not 50-50 male-female. Did y'all know that? I'm going to make this bigger. Do y'all know how to make this bigger? There's some little...
For a magnifying glass or a reflector.
Yeah, taking the magnifying glass. There's some little thing I'm supposed to make this. Y'all see how many? It's actually, women make up about 51%, men make up about 49% of the census. You can take a look yourself. But what's the U.S. government? Can y'all see it back there? Can y'all see? Should there be, oh, you're talking like up here. Yeah, it's, sorry. It's 66% are men and 33% are women. So 66.5%. Women make up 33.95, men make up 66.05. African American is 11.01%. What is the percentage of African Americans in America? Yeah, about 12, 13%. So actually, when it comes to race, we have a representative bureaucracy for African Americans and whites. Asian Americans, fairly close. Hispanics make up a much larger portion. They're about 12, 13% as well. But they make up only about 4.5%. So you get to see that some groups are overrepresented. Okay, y'all can take off, and I'll see you Wednesday. We're going to talk about the judiciary and Supreme Court cases. You'll get to learn that Roe versus Wade is not the law of the land. What? Yeah.
The National Senate will know themselves.
I'm sorry?
Are they calling National Senate to send you?
Right. I sent out an email today saying, because I only have 2 people who say that they're going to go.
Yeah, and I have a coach involved for my class, so.
Oh, you can't, okay.
Yeah.
But that's on Wednesday.
It's on Wednesday?
Yeah, Wednesday the 19th.
Yeah.
Yep, so during the presidential debate. So check that out again.
Yeah, it's a bus that sees study center, so more people can go.
Right, so if you want to go ahead and shoot me contact.
Take it easy,
All
sir.
right, see you, Simon.